Though it feels considerably longer, as of today, Donald Trump has only been back in power officially for 100 miserable days. And later on this evening, he's supposed to give some sort of bullshit speech commemorating these nightmare 3 months. But in the real world, the consensus is clear. Trump is objectively the least popular president in American history, and these 100 days have been an abject failure in poll after poll after poll after poll after poll on virtually every major issue, and we have to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, for a quick recap of Trump's 100 days, because it's hard to really distill it in just a few minutes, but Mehdi Hassan, progressive journalist and friend of the show, does a Herculean job. In about 2 minutes, he puts the Trump administration's first 100 days into context. So brace yourselves, pop the popcorn. We're going to let Mehdi rattle this off, and I'll see you on the other side.
100 days. That's how long Donald Trump has been president for a second time. And I know it feels more like 100 weeks or 100 months because he's done so much and so much damage. It's hard to keep up with all of his abuses of power, his crimes, craziness, chaos. So let me do it for you. Here are Trump's 100 days in 100 seconds. Start the clock. Trump signed a record number of executive actions in a single day, including one that aims to end birthright citizenship, which a judge called blatantly unconstitutional. He pardoned more than 1,200 convicted January 6 rioters. He took control of the press pool that covers him and banned the AP from presidential events. He arrested a judge. He reinstated the federal death penalty. He's establishing a Bitcoin reserve and offering private dinners to investors in his meme coin. He unleashed Elon Musk and Doge on the federal government bureaucracy to fire thousands of public servants. He did basically a free ad for Tesla on the White House front lawn. He and Musk cut 90% of U.S. foreign aid contracts. He signed an executive order to try and shut down the Department of Education. His defense secretary accidentally shared Yemen war plans with the editor of The Atlantic in a single group chat. Trump then bombed Yemen. He cut $400 million in federal grants to Columbia University, froze $2.3 billion in funding to Harvard University. He invoked the 1798 Alien Enemies Act, even though we're not at war, and tried to house undocumented migrants here in the U.S. at Guantanamo Bay. He revoked the visas of more than 1,000 foreign students in the U.S. He detained and tried to deport green card holder Mahmoud Khalil for his speech. He illegally sent Kilmar Abrego Garcia to a prison camp in El Salvador and has defied a Supreme Court ruling telling him to try and get him back. He's deported multiple U.S. citizen children, including some with cancer. He imposed tariffs on 185 countries and territories, including a bunch of islands with only penguins on them. He then announced a 90-day pause for most of those countries, but not China, and wiped out around $10 trillion in global equity value in the process. He said he might invade Greenland, take back the Panama Canal, make Canada the 51st state, and threatened to bomb Iran like it's never been bombed before. He said he wants to clean out Gaza and move the Palestinians there to Egypt and Jordan. He hosted conspiracy theorists, Laura Loomer in the Oval Office, and then fired government officials, apparently at her request. He called Ukrainian President Zelensky a dictator and then publicly berated him on live TV, bullied big law firms, called himself king, said Chuck Schumer's no longer Jewish, he's a Palestinian, and he wants to keep doing all of this for 8 more years because he's not ruling out serving an unconstitutional third term. Subscribe to Zateo.
You should subscribe to Zateo if you have not already. It's just a masterclass in progressive journalism, and kudos to Mehdi for doing it. And kudos to Mehdi for that, 100-second recap. And I'm sure, again, he had to omit things for time. There is no question that there's been a lot of activity from the Trump administration. Of course, people confuse activity with accomplishments, and I would argue they're two very different things. Sean Hannity last night was trying desperately to come up with a really robust list of Donald Trump's many accomplishments, and as Aaron Rupar lampooned, he renamed the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, rescinded dozens of Biden executive orders, imposed steel and aluminum tariffs. So as Aaron Rupar translates, signed some things, signed more things, wrecked the economy. LMAO Hannity's ticker got even more pathetic. Declassified the JFK files, ended federal support for paper straws. You're reaching. You ain't got shit when you're like peddling that out. And ended production of the penny. Now that one is something that has bipartisan support, but the actual accomplishments of the Trump administration are few and far between in terms of meaningful, positive results for the American people. And as Fact Post on Twitter has been pointing out, it's worst 100-day approval rating in 80 years. ABC News, Trump has lowest 100-day approval rating in 80 years, per its poll. CNN poll, Trump's approval at 100 days lower than any president in at least 7 decades. The Washington Post says Trump's approval rating down from February. Do you approve or disapprove the way Trump is handling his job as president? April, only 39% approve compared to February, where it was 53% and still pretty bad. And even Fox News, overall approval of Trump's job performance comes in at 44%, down 5 points from 49% approval in March. They had a subsequent follow-up as well right here. The Fox News poll, again, worst 100-day approval rating in 80 years. Trump is underwater on the vast majority of issues. And again, they list others as well. We've gone through many of the polls. The polls are still coming in. I'm looking forward to Nate Silver of the Silver Bulletin updating his aggregator as far as Trump's approval rating is concerned. I want to take a look at the Wall Street Journal. This is a Fox News sister publication. It is a conservative outlet. They are pro-Trump, but they are honest enough and principled enough to call, at least occasionally, Trump out. And this is the editorial board. At 100 days, Trump 2.0 is in trouble. The tariff shock he's unleashed could sink his second term. Presidential second terms are rarely successful, and on the evidence of his first 100 days, Trump's won't be different. Trump needs a major reset if he wants to rescue his final years from the economic and foreign policy shocks he has unleashed. There's no denying his energy or ambition. Trump is pressing ahead on multiple fronts, and he's had some success. His expansion of U.S. energy production is proceeding well and much needed after the Biden war on fossil fuels. He's ended the border crisis in short order. Two things to note there. As far as energy production, domestic energy production was higher under President Biden than it was in Trump's first term. So again, he's inheriting, as far as energy production is concerned, a pretty good situation from President Biden as far as border contacts at the southern border because of Biden executive orders when Trump sabotaged a bipartisan congressional act of legislation to try to campaign and demagogue on the issue during the election. Biden imposed executive orders, which also radically curtailed contacts at the southern border. So again, Trump inherited a fairly good situation there from President Biden, or at least a rapidly improving one. So we'll continue. He's also rolling back federal assaults on mainstream American values, such as by policing racial favoritism. Trump was elected to counter the excesses of the left on climate, culture, and censorship, and he's doing it. We'll get back to censorship in a moment. Another priority is the execution hasn't matched the promises. That would seem to apply to DOGE, which we've seen, which we've supported, but has been so frenetic it isn't clear what it's achieving. Easy targets like USAID make for symbolic victories, but no fundamental change in the growth of government. The Trump budget will offer more reform proposals if the White House can get them through Congress. He badly needs a pro-growth tax bill. And actually, as a matter of fact, I'm going to pull this up in real time. I saw this earlier today, but I think the government. Oh, this is it right here. CBS has the report. Despite Trump's promised cuts, U.S. spent about $220 billion more in the first 100 days than last year. So much for cutting government spending. Trump is as profligate as ever. Even on popular causes, one problem has been needless excess. Harvard and other universities need to change, but trying to dictate their curriculum and faculty choices is an intrusion on free speech and risks defeat in court. His deportation of criminals is worthwhile, but denying due process and toying with the courts will sour the effort. The White House motto seems to be that if something is worth doing, it's worth doing too much. That's especially true on tariffs, which could sink his presidency. Trump was elected to control inflation and raise real incomes, but tariffs do the opposite. They guarantee at least a one-time increase in prices on imported goods that will flow through the economy. They portend shortages for consumers and for businesses that source goods and components from abroad. The tariffs are the largest economic policy shock since Richard Nixon blew up Bretton Woods in 1971, which unleashed inflation that Nixon tried to stop with wage and price controls and a tariff. The economic consequences arguably doomed Nixon's second term, perhaps as much as Watergate. It's a mistake to think the tariff damage is only domestic. The willy-nilly assault on friends and foes has shaken global confidence in U.S. reliability. Ken Griffin, the investor and donor to Republicans in Trump's inaugural committee, summed it up last week as a self-inflicted blow to the American brand. The U.S. is needlessly ceding global economic leadership. China is already taking advantage by courting U.S. allies as a more dependable giant market. This will make it much harder to build a trade alliance to stop China's often predatory economic behavior. Trump last week called this China-loving, which must amuse Beijing. Trump's tariffs on allies are the real gift to Xi Jinping. There are signs that Trump is finally recognizing some of the tariff risks as he now talks of doing some 200 trade deals. He's also saying he might unilaterally cut his 145% tariff on Chinese imports. We'd like nothing better than to see a retreat, a mid-Iran moment, as we wrote last week about the reversal by the 1980s French socialist. But Trump remains a long way from making such a pivot, and those trade deals won't be easy to strike. Trump's second-term foreign policy is so far as a work in progress. He's trying to reclaim Middle East sea lanes from the Houthis after President Biden's timidity, and he's restoring maximum pressure on Iran to abandon its nuclear program. These are hopeful signs. Again, interesting to see what sort of pressure that he has to make Iran abandon its nuclear program, given that the Iran nuclear deal that was signed by President Obama was doing just that. Trump shredded it, didn't replace it to any extent, and progress continued in terms of Iran's nuclear program because the Obama deal was no longer in effect. So Trump created a mess and is now desperately trying to clean it up. And so far, nothing. The main cause for alarm is his one-sided pursuit of peace in Ukraine. Until this weekend, he has scarcely said a discouraging word about Vladimir Putin while squeezing Ukraine to make concessions that could doom it to future marauding. Much will hang on the details of an armistice, if there is one, and not merely for Europe's future. Joe Biden's retreat from Afghanistan destroyed American deterrence. A debacle in Ukraine would do the same for Trump, with ramifications for Iran, North Korea, and especially Chinese ambitions in the Pacific. Don't be surprised if China decides to snatch Taiwan's outer islands or tries a partial blockade. Trump told us in October that he'd respond to such a provocation with tariffs, but he's already playing that card without success. In conclusion, they say, voters reelected Trump in part because they remembered fondly his first-term economy, but that success owed mainly to his pursuit of conventional GOP priorities like tax reform and deregulation. This term, he's indulging his trade and foreign policy obsessions, and the early results are negative. He'll fail unless he heeds the warning. So that's what the Wall Street Journal has to say on it. They've also got other scathing op-eds about Trump in his first 100 days. I will also try to find this in real time. I had to save. We'll conclude with this. I had this up earlier. Exclusive. Most Americans see Trump as dangerous dictator, polls say. The majority of Americans say Trump is a, quote, dangerous dictator who poses a threat to democracy and believe he's overstepped his authority by actions such as the mass firings of federal employees, a new survey says. The wide-ranging poll released Tuesday on Trump's 100th day in office is the latest sign of him losing support for his immigration and economic policies, the two issues that largely fueled his reelection. Only 4 in 10 Americans expressed favorable views of Trump after his first 100 days in office, according to the survey by the Nonpartisan Public Religion Research Institute, PRRI. And 52% agreed with the provocative statement that Trump, quote, is a dangerous dictator whose power should be limited before he destroys American democracy. So yeah, that's what Donald Trump has accomplished in his 100 days. Again, he will be making some sort of bullshit speech later on this evening. I'm sure I'll do a video about it to try to save you all the suffering of meandering through it yourselves, because I'm sure it's going to go for like 2 or 3 hours. But the truth is, Donald Trump is objectively unpopular, historically unpopular, and his 100 days in office have been historically disastrous, as well as an assault on free speech, First Amendment rights, due process. He pardoned January 6th insurrectionists, so he's effectively signaled to his supporters that if push comes to shove, he's got their back in terms of their illegal excesses, and there seems to be no limiting principle to this administration. And the only other checks against Trump come from the other 2 branches, and those 2 branches are controlled by Trump's ideological allies, conservatives on the Supreme Court and the Republican Party in Congress. And certainly the Republican Party in Congress is too feckless to meaningfully check him. That's where we are. Never forget it. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.